Honestly, it was really hard. It was really just me working through constant negative emotions with myself. It was like, all right, because some days I'd show up and I'd be like, all right, like, forget this. I'm just going to train really bad because I just want to show how angry I am. And it got me nowhere.
Excellence is about standing, and excellence is a requirement for your dream to come true.
I had to be probably maybe 3 years old. And a more vivid memory is probably when I was like five or six, and I started to first be able to juggle. And I remember I was able to get in one day of training up to like 7 juggles, and I thought that was amazing. So that's my most vivid memory right now. Yeah.
Very cool. What's your number now? How many can you get?
To infinity. To infinity. Honestly, yeah.
Was your family into sport or like high level type of sports, or were you really the first one to try to push it further than just playing for fun?
Yeah, no, my dad was a runner in college and in high school. Very good track runner. He was a mile runner. So he was a part of the Penn State relays and all the major runnings before deciding to kind of take his running into more of a soccer transition. Just he fell in love with the game. He didn't play professionally, but he loved the sport, and he felt that me and my brother could do really well in it because he loved it and he could teach it. So basically, I had an older brother, and I always tell this in any interview or podcast or whatever. I had an older brother who was like a phenom when I was younger. He was like the guy for the United States when he was very young. He was one of the first soccer players, American soccer players, to go over to another country at the time in Europe. He went to Nottingham Forest in England, and he went to Villarreal in Spain, and Valencia in Spain, and they offered him contracts when he was very very little, 9 years old, 10 years old, and so I always just kind of followed in his footsteps. He was like the well known product in Colorado in the United States, and he did national team stuff with the United States national team and everything, and so for me it was kind of just following in his footsteps, listening to stories of his and learning from his technique, and learning stuff from my dad as well. So more along those lines. It probably didn't really become anything about really more myself until I got into, I'd say, like my college career, because by then my brother had kind of just started to finish. He wasn't going to pursue it
Mhm.
professionally, so now it was kind of like, all right, I'm gonna take the next steps if I can. If that makes
Nice.
sense.
When you didn't really, I mean, when you didn't have him as your kind of idol or person you were following, do you have any role model while growing from Europe or from the US? Even though you said he was kind of the first one to actually export himself
Yeah,
to Europe.
role models in the U.S. Not really. No, the player and the person I looked up to the most, and you'll love this being in Montreal, is that the player I liked the most growing up was Didier Drogba, and he was the
Nice.
reason that I started to really love the game, fall in love with Chelsea, fall in love with like yeah, just the whole process of wanting to become a professional player really was because of him, and so he was like my one and only probably true role model that I looked up to as a soccer player. So now I don't really have anybody anymore, but I would say always, yeah, he was my main one.
Very cool. So I was actually born in France. I live in Montreal now, but I was born in France. So we had Didier Drogba around for quite some time. So he was also for us some sort of an idol, and yeah, someone people someone people were looking up to. So very cool. And for you, so when did you know that you would pursue further than your brother did, and you wanted to make it as a pro? Was there a specific point in time or event or success that was for you kind of that tipping point?
Probably when I went to Europe in between my junior and senior year in college was my opportunity to go and kind of do my own thing, and my brother had never done that before. He had always kind of grown up in the Mexican system, so he was a lot playing in Mexico, and he had been to Europe, but not really in a professional environment. So it was the first time for anyone in my family to to be able to go over there. And I did all of the Nordic region, so Scandinavia, Denmark, and Norway. And I felt like, I can do this. I can hang with these guys. I can get to this level. And obviously, I ended up signing my first professional contract in Sweden at 19. So that was when I really knew, like, okay, now it's my own path to start, carving out. I don't really have anybody else to follow anymore.
Mm. And was it, I mean, for your family specifically, like you said, there used to be not so many US players that made it to the top level in soccer. How did your family and their loved ones realize that? And did they realize early that you could make something in soccer? Was it obvious for them? Were they helping and pushing you, or were they trying to hold you back because they didn't necessarily believe in it?
No, they were definitely pushing me. They were definitely pushing me, and I think there was never a sense of holding back from anybody. And even normally in sports families, you hear it all the time that the father pushes and then the mother pulls a little bit because she wants education and everything. What My parents were like a perfect blend of like making sure I get education, but still push your dreams, push your goals. My dad especially knew that I could make it. He knew I had the right physicality and athleticism and mindset, and I think he saw me learn a lot from the things that ultimately caused my brother to not want to go professional, which oftentimes in sports is just down to politics. It's a lot of political stuff you have to be able to throw aside and not dive too much into and kind of brush over your shoulder. And that's the business side of the sport, unfortunately. So I was able to kind of learn from that and not let that, get too much in the way of my early start of my career. And I think that's also why they saw like, okay, he's gonna be able to do this and make it. So and yeah, here we are now, 9.5 years later, so still going.
So within those 10 years that you get there, you say in Sweden you're 19. Yeah, young adult, let's say, probably on your own. I would assume your family didn't follow you there. So how do you quote unquote survive, in an environment where you're probably the US player around in the middle of other European guys? Yeah, is it like a tough change, tough move to go there and have to prove yourself kind of like from scratch again?
100%, 100%. Very tough. It was the best learning experience I've had probably as a young adult. I'd say my first few days there and my first few days in Belgium were my two best learning experiences as adults, because you go into, as you say, environments where immediately you have to reset yourself from being maybe an alpha in a situation where I was in college to now being the very bottom of the totem pole, and also someone who's not from the country, doesn't speak the language, is never been a professional before. So it was a big humility lesson for me, but it was just what I needed. And I kind of just dove into it head first and right away tried to like fully embrace myself in the culture. So that meant, learning the language, learning the way of football there, learning the way of tactics, learning, how to act as a Swedish person. And that's really what I think ultimately helped me be so successful there, is I fully adapted to them and they didn't have to adapt to me. I kind of just was like, all right, I'm here in your culture, in your country. I'm gonna, learn your ways, not only from a football standpoint, but also from a lifestyle. And after 6.5 to 7 months, I started speaking Swedish, and I started having regular conversations with people and understanding the team meetings, speaking Swedish in post-game interviews and on the field with the players. And from there, it kind of got better and better and better because it started to feel like my home. And I think that was the biggest thing for me, was like not showing up at some place and then being like, well, this is me and you need to learn how to deal with me. But okay, I'm in your culture. I'm going to learn from you guys, and see how well I can fit in with them. And I think the Swedish especially, really, they appreciated that.
Yeah, and it resonates very much. So I moved from France to Montreal. The culture, the language, it's so less different than it was probably for you, but still you have to adapt, and it's easy, especially for people who haven't traveled so much before. You from a French person gets to Montreal, it's like, oh, about their accent. And I don't know. When you're here in Montreal, you're the one with the accent. Here they don't have an accent.
Yeah,
And when
yeah,
they are in France, they are the ones with the accent. You have to always put things in perspective. And just the same way you say you get there and you have to adapt to them, they don't have to adapt to you. So it's incredible, and
Yeah.
doing it in 6 months was pretty amazing. And did you feel even outside of the field, like you said, just maybe friends and your teammates outside of the outside of the field, did they kind of congratulate you on this? Were they surprised that you were so fast to adapt and to speak the language and just get in the mix?
Yes and no. I think anybody that can learn a new language will always be, accepted quickly and appreciated because, if you've ever had to go through that yourself, you understand how difficult it is. But I think also once the players got to know who I was and like my mentality, I think that they kind of expected that I would fully learn the language and be in a situation where I can speak with them fluently in Swedish, just because I was really like that. I was like, okay, if I'm gonna go and play here, I need to learn how to speak to everybody, and have conversations not only on the field. That was my first thing. Was like, okay, I have to be able to communicate on the field, which every athlete will do. Anywhere you go in the world, you have to learn, the language on the field. But then it's also like you travel with these guys. You stay in hotels, buses, flights, everything. You're always around them. So if you can't communicate with them, it's so difficult. You don't really have any relationships with the players. So it was a big thing for me. Like I want to develop it, relationships with the players. I want to be able to speak with them, enjoy good conversation. And that's why I wanted to push myself to learn, Swedish. The nice thing was most of the players did speak English really well, but they loved that I learned
Yeah.
Swedish. And I think that was like, all right, we accept you now, like as a Swedish guy, like coming in, and I've taken that, pretty much anywhere I've tried to go is like I want to just I'll fill into what the culture already is. I'm not going to come and change everything like because of who I am, So that was a big thing I've kind of taken each place.
And so, how long did you end up staying over there?
3.5 years.
Nice. So yeah, at the end you were perfectly fluent, I would guess. And then from there
Yeah,
you moved to Belgium. Is that right?
that's correct. Yeah, from there to Belgium. Big culture change. Very big culture change.
Yeah. So how was it in Belgium? And did you have to learn whatever the region you were in, French or any other language?
Yeah, so I was in the Flemish region, so it would have been Flemish, so a bit of Dutch French mix. It's really more Dutch. We were in Kortrijk, which is just on the border of Lille and Champagne in France. So those two, actually, those regions we were in a lot. Me and my wife, we'd go to Lille probably like 2 or 3 times a week, just because it was a better area to go and get good food and groceries, and it was a lot bigger as well. The city is a really nice city. So, but getting back to Kortrijk in Belgium in general, the league was a lot tougher. It was a lot more cultures coming from everywhere. And so actually what in terms of language, we just spoke English in the locker room because there were so many different guys from all over the place that you couldn't really pinpoint. There was like, 3 or 4 French speakers, 5 or 6 Dutch speakers, but a lot of guys that were speaking English because they were coming from Serbia, parts of Asia, Africa, all over the place. So, the language thing was not as easy because even the coaches that we had, they all spoke English all the time. So for me to learn Flemish or Dutch probably wasn't necessary. And then in terms of the French, I wish I would have learned a bit more, but being that I was in a Flemish region, in the Dutch region, we didn't really need it. Now, if I was like in the east of Belgium, where like Liège and those types of places are, maybe I would, of course, need to have the French because all the players there speak French. But yeah, it was a bit more of just an English setup. But anyway, in terms of like the differences, yeah, I mean Belgium was a lot more cutthroat. I mean, there was always players coming in and coming out. Coaches were being, hired and then fired and then hired and then so it was like a constant rotation. The league itself was very physical, games all the time, playing straight through Christmas and, like a real European schedule. So it was tough. It wasn't easy to adapt to it, and I had a lot of good moments, a lot of bad moments. But I was still only 23 when I first arrived there. I ended up leaving when I was 27. Um, but I probably grew the most in that time period because of all the changes and difficulties I had while I was there. Yeah.
Mhm. So you mentioned one of the things you said before about your brother was the politics and the business of sports in general, which makes you go to Sweden, then Belgium, then back to the US. Is it exhausting, and do you not lose faith at some point, but do you wonder if it's worth kind of getting integrated into the new country or city that you get in, not knowing if you stay there for 2 months, 2 years, or the next 20 years? You don't really have like an actual timeline. So is it something that's been tiring and exhausting for you to just not know basically?
It is, and I think that's one of the hardest things about being a professional in any circumstance is that you never know where you're going to go next. You never have safety. You never have the feeling of being there, okay, I'm going to be here for a long time, even if you have a long-term deal, because I had a 5-year deal in Belgium. I only ended up staying 3 years, but there was many times throughout that 3 years where I could have left. I had opportunities to leave, um, and some of those opportunities actually, when I wanted to leave, I wasn't allowed to leave because the club wouldn't let me. So there's just a lot of political stuff that goes into it, and at the end of the day, it is a business decision for the clubs to determine whether they want to hold on to a player or move on from him. Um, but it's just part of how the sport is, and when certain guys just don't want to put up with it anymore, that's when they usually stop playing. They're like, okay, I don't want to move again. I'm just going to stay here, and I'm happy where we are, and that's that. And honestly, I can tell you from my perspective, like when I had gotten to DC United and DC, that was kind of a new start for me, and I had kind of planned to be there for quite a long time. I had no intention of leaving. The club had given me no intention of letting me go, and I was planning on being there for 5, 6, 7 years, as long as I want to. And there you go. After 3 years, big changes and everything happens, and all of a sudden you're gone, and it's like, okay, you're on to the next thing, and you either accept it and adapt it again and start a new situation, or you lay down and say, okay, that's it, I don't want to play anymore, and I'm just going to stay here and hang it up. So that's what happens a lot with athletes. They ultimately decide if they want to keep going or not, usually based off of because they have to move somewhere else, and so um, but sometimes as well, it works out for the right reasons. So, and then in this circumstance, now I'm in a fantastic club here in Austin. I couldn't be happier, with having everything happen the way it did to now have me be here. So, you know, on the same side, there's also a lot of positives in something that could be seemingly, a super negative situation.
Yeah. Yeah. So very quickly back to Belgium, you said lots of high moments and probably even more low moments. Uh, what are those? Are they like low performances? Are they coaches not letting you play or giving you a chance? Is it like injuries? What would you say were those numerous low moments that you mentioned?
It was more along the lines of me just learning how Europe football works in general, and I think the biggest thing for me was never getting complacent with where you are. And so the story basically was in 2023 I signed. Sorry, not 2023. And sorry, 2018 I signed. I was 23 years old, and I signed with the team in Belgium, and somehow, some way, it was a record transfer for a defender, which I still laugh at today because it's like we're the least valuable players on the field, so I'm not sure how it was a record transfer by any means. But I arrived, and there was a lot of expectation for whatever situation that I had put myself in now, being brought into the club. First 13 or 14 games I played, everything was really good, was playing in good form and rhythm, and felt like, man, I'm exceeding my expectation as well about being here. And then all of a sudden I had a game where we were winning like 2-0. It was the 30th, 32nd minute, and the coach pulled me out. And I'm thinking to myself, like, wow, this is crazy. Like, I've never been subbed before half. And anytime in soccer, if you're subbed before half, it's like a big statement. Like, okay, this player's either injured or he's been horrendous. And I was like, well, I'm not injured. And I think, I haven't been horrendous because we're winning 2-0, but okay. Pulled me off. The coach didn't say a word to me. And I didn't play for the next 3 games, 4 games. Didn't touch the field. And I was like, wow, I don't know what's going on. One day he came up to me before one of the biggest games we had that year, and he said, have you learned your lesson yet? And I said, I don't know. I haven't spoke to you in like, 2 or 3 weeks. I don't know what my lesson is that I'm expected to learn. He goes, yeah, exactly. You need to always be humble in every situation and realize that you're never irreplaceable. I said, okay, that's quite a way to teach, a 23-year-old American about that, but here we are. This is
Yeah.
the reality of Europe, that these guys are like I said, these coaches come in as fast as they come in, they go out, but they try to prove their points while they're there. So anyway, so then yeah, so then I came back, started playing again. Funny enough, I played a few games directly in a row. The last game that we had that he was in charge, I scored, and then he announced to us after the game that he had been fired. And then it was like, okay, here we go again. The new coach that came in, he did not like me at all. Did not like the way I played. Didn't like my personality. Didn't like me, period. And he didn't play me for like 10 months. I didn't play a single game. And
Jesus.
that was a really low point for me because I basically knew every day at training, no matter what the scenario was, if I trained perfect, I wouldn't play. And that was a tough thing to have happen for me at that age, and being so far away from, my family and stuff. But again, it's part of how European football was. So that was my learning lesson, my low point. But I'm glad it happened. I'm glad it happened. It led me to being to where I am now today. So, um, but it wasn't easy at the time. I definitely had a lot of thoughts about like stopping to play, and I was only 24 at the time. So it would have been really sad for me to like give up at that time period because I was still so young.
Interesting. So I love what you just said about those 10 months. And if you want to be a bit more granular, so when you were in those 12 months, 10 months, which is about 300 days, how is your brain working every morning when you wake up? You don't know why you're not playing. You know you're not going to play probably. You're kind of stuck in that team. What keeps you motivated? What keeps you up and make you want to wake up? Put your shoes on and keep playing.
Yeah, I mean, I wish I could sit here and give a nice motivational speech about, those hard moments at that time when I was so young. But honestly, it was really hard. It was really hard, and it was really just me working through constant negative emotions with myself. It was like, all right, because some days I'd show up and I'd be like, all right, like forget this. I'm just gonna train really bad because I just want to show how angry I am, and it got me nowhere. And then the next day I'd show up and I'd train really well, and it'd be like, it got me nowhere. So I was like, all right, it's only on myself. Eventually, that's what I figured out. It's myself. It's my own standard that I want to set. And that's kind of how I left it with like my last months at the club, was I want to leave in a sense that, okay, whatever the scenario was with me and the coach and the club, whatever, like I wanted my reputation to be that, okay, he was a guy that showed up and did his job every day. So, um, it was not an easy solution in my head to come to because I had so much negativity swarming around me from the anger and hatred I had toward the club and toward the coach. But again, it eventually just became, all right, I can't affect any of that. It's only going to be on myself, on how I train, my own standards. And funny enough, like once I got into that mindset, I just felt like things started to happen in a better way for me. All of a sudden, when I finally was able to come around to being back to my best self, that coach was fired and let go, and a new coach came in and started playing me again. And then I had my chance, when DC came to take me on loan, and it was just like everything fell into the right pockets at the right moments.
Mhm. So, just on the technical side, you said take me on loan. Does that mean that they rent you from your club? So you're officially a player in from the Belgium team, but you play with
Yeah,
them temporarily. In theory, is that how it
correct.
works?
Yeah, that was correct. And again, another part of the
Um,
business side that, is kind of strange is I obviously hadn't played a lot, and the club, whatever the situation was. And so I had said when DC first came, I was like, let them just buy me. Let them buy me so I can be free of the club because I don't want to come back. I wanted to be done with the club in Belgium. And they wouldn't let me. They wouldn't let me. They're like, no, no, we invested money in you. You have a 5-year deal here. Like you can go there and then we'll decide after if you're going to come back or you can stay there. And it was very strange for me because I was also like disheartened because I knew like, okay, if I go to DC and do really well, there's still a chance I have to come back to Belgium and be on this club still because they technically still owned me. So yeah, again, political side of sports is a tough one. Tough one.
so you end up in DC. I read that you also uh, wanted to go back to the US because you were pregnant. Your wife was waiting a child. So did that also help in getting you there? And what's your situation now? Are you free from that club? I would assume so because you spent 3 years and then you're now in
Yeah.
Austria.
Yeah, yeah. So that was a really crazy couple days. I had basically my wife had told me like, I think I need to go take a pregnancy test. I said, all right, let's go find out. And so she went and she found out she was. She didn't believe it at the time. She was like, I don't know how I can be pregnant. I'm not sure. Without getting into details of it, but she said, okay, let's go see the doctor. And so the doctor confirmed that day, that night. He said, yeah, oh, yeah, they do a blood count test to see, for the women, and they can see based off that how if they're pregnant. He said, you're 100% pregnant. And so, and she was already like some way along as well. And so we were like, okay, like, we were ready, but it was a bit of a shock for us at the same time. So we said, okay, like we have our life established here, but we'll figure this out with everything. The next day, I got a call from Hernan Losada, who was the old coach of Montreal there, and he said, "I'm starting a new project here in DC, and I want you to come. What do you think?" And I was like, "Uh, yeah."
Nice.
I said, "I don't know anything about DC. I mean, obviously, I know where it is and stuff." I said, "I don't know much about the club. I know they've been struggling for a while, and whatever." And he said, yeah, but we and I knew Hernan a little bit already because he played as a player in Belgium, and then also he was a coach in Belgium. So I had played against him on various occasions. But he was able to convince me over the phone in like 20 minutes that this was the right thing for me and to come. And so I said, okay. So after that, within 48 hours from that phone call, we were landing in DC with our stuff and my pregnant wife, and we were like, wow, this is a new life for us now, but here we are. So, yeah.
Very cool. It goes super fast. It seems like you talk about like 3 years and stuff like that, but it can be overnight or within 48 hours. You everything completely change. And like you said, it's a business, so you're all human beings. But at the end of the day, for the clubs, you are assets that they trade and they sell and they loan, which is funny in a sense. So you landed now in Austin. It's funny because I checked your Instagram, of course, before we chatted, and it seemed that a lot of what you post and how the team seems to resonates is a lot about like a big family. There's not much about soccer itself. It seems like there's a lot about the ambiance and all the surroundings around the team and the green and all of that. Yeah, describe a bit about that. And you said that you're super happy you landed there.
Yeah, I mean, so Austin came into the league 4 years ago, so it's a newer team in the league. But obviously, anybody who has watched the league has seen that from the get-go, the infrastructure and the project that Austin put together is phenomenal. It is one of the best projects that's been put together in the MLS in terms of the fact that it's the only professional sports team that's there in that city. So the amount of fans and interest that it draws is massive. Also, the fact that they have an incredible infrastructure, both from a training facility, a youth academy, and then as well the stadium. The Q2 stadium is probably in many players' eyes, a top three stadium to play in the MLS in terms of the ambiance that is created, in terms of how interacting the fans are, how noisy are. They're the longest sellout streak right now in MLS with 64 straight sellouts. So they have an incredible record of drawing attendance. But for me, that was obviously a really key part of a reason why I came. But the biggest thing for me at this point in my career was wanting to be at a club that did involve the families and treat the families in the right way. Because, with having a daughter now, having my wife come to all the games, I wanted it to feel like they're part of the experience, as much as they can feel like it without obviously being on the field with me. And that was a big thing for me. And I learned right away that the families are treated with huge respect. They're given everything they need from a support standpoint, the hospitality that they are given as well. So that was a big thing for me in coming, because I don't know how long I can play. I don't know how long I can do this. Hopefully, many more years. But for the time being, I wanted it to be something where they were super happy with where they were as well, along with me. So it's like a package deal for us to all come and be happy. And they are. They love it. They love the club. They love being at the games. They've come to the training center a few times for like family barbecues and stuff that's there. And that aspect just makes players want to stay at clubs for a lot longer. So it's really nice.
That's very nice. Plus, the fact, like you said, that it's the only pro team in the city definitely helps. There is that whole ambiance again
Yeah,
around the stadium. I
yeah,
was just watching as you were talking about this, that there's about 20,000 seats, which is not like a huge stadium, but it also helps
no,
having it sold out. And people
yeah,
that come here really want to be here. It's not people invited for business, just sitting here
yeah,
and drinking champagne. It's actually like real fans that are in the game
yeah,
and really here to push you. So yeah, that will be
yeah,
I'd love to go.
for sure.
The one place I think I heard it's getting better and better to be. So hopefully at some point I'll have the chance to see one of your games.
Yeah, that would be awesome. And the cool thing as well is I think a lot of fans have said from the get-go though that the stadium needs to be bigger, because I think there's another 25 or 30,000 people that wait on a waiting list to get into season tickets. So there's a lot of interest even
No
for fans that aren't able to.
way.
Yeah, so it's a huge
You
waiting
said
list
that
to
there are
get
as many
into.
people on the there are as many people on the wait list for the season ticket than there are actually number of seats right now.
Yes,
Wow.
yes. In fact, I think there's even more than there's available. But they still wanna, and the way I've understood is they still want to be able to create a certain atmosphere at the games, and I think they don't want to be
Mhm.
able to get away from that. So it's about maybe one day they'll talk about expanding the stadium because there's no question they will still fill up the stadium, but they still want to keep a certain ambiance inside the stadium with how they've built it. So I know that there's that constant conversation about how can we have both. But yeah.
And right now, so I was checking just before we chatted. You won the last two games, and you're third in the West. So what do you see for the rest of the season?
I mean, it's nice to have those rankings and whatnot, but yeah, I think for me, I know well enough at this point in my career that it's a really long season. So when you're this early in the season, it's more just about getting points while you can to give yourself a cushion for whatever could happen in the season because you have all kinds of things that can go wrong in terms of injuries or guys gone on national team duty or you just get into a bad form or whatever. So picking up points early is so crucial, especially at home, which we've done. I think we got five victories in a row now at home, which has been huge for us. Um, and yeah, now at this point, it's taking it game by game. In Texas, it's extremely hot here in the summer. So, coming into the summer months now, it's only going to get harder for us because we have to play and train consistently in weather that's not easy to be in. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, we're in a good moment. The team is in a good moment. We don't have a ton of guys on the roster. We have the probably second or third smallest roster in the MLS in terms of numbers of players. I think we only have 20 guys now rostered, 20, 21 guys rostered, so it's very small. But it's a great group, and you know we have a lot of experience too. So I think everybody's kind of in the same mindset as me. Like, yeah, we're in a good state, but it's a long, long season. We have a long way to go. If this was October and we were in this situation, maybe I'd give you a bit more of like rah rah rah. But it's a
Yeah.
we're in the end of May. We still have a good 6 months left. So let's just take it as
Yeah.
it comes for sure.
Nice. And so moving on here, because like I said, I don't want to keep you too long. You're just back from training. On the personal side, what do you already prepare for the after career? You're still young for me. You're younger than me. But in the world of sports, it's quick to get older than the rest of the pack. Is it something that you think or that you've been thinking for some time, just preparing for what will come next?
Yeah, you have to. You have to. No matter how old you are, you always have to know. And I think, when I had my two big injuries that I had a few years ago, I had to start really thinking about it more, what I was going to do with my life after. I still don't have an official answer on it, but I've started to dive into different things that could interest me or could bring me some level of similar happiness that, this career has given me. So usually in the off season when the season is done, I like to try to take opportunities to go and visit other companies or do like shadowing programs to see what it's like in a whole nother environment. This last off season, I got to go to Warner Brothers Discovery in Atlanta, which is like the um, TV producing side of sports. So they do all like the NBA on TNT and NHL and MLB, US soccer, all that stuff. So I got to see like the broadcasting side, and that was cool. I got to understand like how, each show and segment is made. This off season, I'm sure I'll do something again, whether it's going and visiting like a bank or some sort of corporation agency to just keep diving in and testing the waters to see what's there. I've met a few people as well over the last few years who have, started to try to get me to move in one direction or the other. But the biggest thing for me is just finding something that I'll be happy in. So, I'm still kind of on the constant discovery list, but it's definitely important to use your off time to be thinking about it. So, it sits in my mind. Does it sit in the front of my mind? No, but it sits in my mind. So I'm not quite there yet where it's like, all right, I really got to know, but I'm getting closer and closer. I know that. So um, I'm starting to really just use all the resources I have to start testing other things to see if something really like sparks me. And I'm like, okay, that's what I want to do.
Hmm. And I also read, I think, on LinkedIn that you are an investor. What is it that you invest in? And yeah, have you started 2015 or something like that? What is it that you do exactly?
Well, I mean, I've done a lot of general investing since I was young, and I've always been like a big advocate of investing as much money as you can, especially for sports athletes. Invest as much of your salary as you can, because it's such a short-lived career. And no matter what you make in terms of, your salaries year to year, it is only for that time period. We're not doctors here, so we're not gonna be on a salary that's gonna go for 20, 30 years. It's a short amount of time. So apart from that, I've also just started to get into like small projects that interest me, that can also bring me some level of like excitement. So like I've talked about doing something with like Ronald McDonald House recently. There's a few things that have come up with like small clothing companies that are also soccer based, and they are looking to change the way of fashion from a eco-friendly standpoint. So there's a lot of different projects that are presented to me. I usually then take it to my financial advisor, and we talk about what's going to be the right idea. But yeah, I mean, I just love the idea of investing in general because um, I didn't have that as a child growing up. I didn't have any sort of understanding of it. So as an adult, once I learned about it and kind of saw the benefits of doing it from a younger age, I fell in love with the idea of investing as much as you can, in very, very diverse things, so you have a bunch of different opportunities, but also the same with like my child. So like when my daughter was born, that was one of the first things I wanted to do was like open up an investment account for her, open up like an IRA if possible, and like just start her off right away from the get-go so that when she is um, of the right age to take that over, whether it be like 18 or older, 25, she's already in such a good set place financially, because I started her off at the right time period, that it just teaches her to then keep passing that down to the next generation and next generation. So that's kind of why I'm just like such a huge advocate for people to invest.
Very interesting. Um, and if you, in that case, if you had the opportunity to yourself talk to, say, 18-year-old Brendan, or even 10-year-old Brendan, what would you tell him?
Oh man, I would tell him that the passion that he has back then is what keeps fueling me now, honestly. Because if you don't have any passion for what you're doing, it's pointless, honestly. And I think that's what got me through all my tough moments in my career is like still loving the game, loving doing what I'm doing on a daily basis. My body and stuff maybe doesn't love it as much as it used to because when I was younger, I could do whatever I wanted to and feel great. But my mind still loves the game every day. And like every day when I step out on the field, I'm so happy to be out there, even if it's for 10 minutes or for whatever the scenario is. So um, that's what I would tell them. I'd say thank you for being so passionate about this because it keeps me going today.
Nice, very nice. Where should people follow you? You've been pretty active, I think, on Instagram. Do you have any other space and social media where you post about your career and also achievements?
I'm honestly not a huge social media guy. I've I have been pushed in a couple different directions. I think Instagram is really the only thing I really use, and it's just because of I know there's a lot of Austin FC and old DC and Kortrijk and Orebro people that have followed me that are on there. Um, LinkedIn I use as well for business and for just like meeting interesting people like yourself and um, just diving into different opportunities. But besides that, no, not really. I mean, I try to not be on it as much as maybe some other people are. So
Pretty low key. If you had one person in mind, apart from Ben that you mentioned before we started recording, that you think I should interview here on the podcast, who would that be?
I would I'll give you one. I'll give you a guy that would be really interesting because he has a similar story a little bit. And it's a player I played with, Frederick Briant. Fred Briant is an ex-DC player. He played for New York City FC, played for KV Ostende in Belgium. He's originally a guy who is from Champagne in France, so not far from
Okay.
where I was living in Kortrijk. So speaks French fluently. He's now a coach. So he was a player who turned coach. He's now a coach for the women's team in DC. But just a very fascinating person and has a really good life story. I would definitely recommend him. Definitely a wonderful guy. So
Nice.
really fun and yeah. If you want me to set you up with him, I definitely can.
That would be wonderful. Yeah. Otherwise, I'll
Yeah,
try my way. But it's
yeah,
good
yeah, yeah,
if you can introduce.
yeah, yeah. He's
And
awesome.
the last
He's
question
awesome.
is this that you saw at the very beginning. That's the Wall of Fame, Museum of Sports, whatever the name is. Is there anything that you think of that you could hang on that wall?
Is there anything that you should hang on that wall? What
No, that
what
you
was
you would have from your career, whatever it might be, that you think would look good. Jersey, sock, whatever.
from my wall of fame? Oh man, I'm not a huge jersey collector. I've never asked any other player for his jersey actually in my whole career. Honestly, what I'd probably do is I'd want to do something when I'm done with my career in my house that I live in, is to put something from my very first game and my very last game. I think that would be really cool. Whether it's a piece of the ball or a jersey or a sock or something, that would be really fun. I think that would be very memorable for me to walk by and see the first to the last. Also, a picture from how much different I look from the first game to the last game. I think that'd be really cool. But I don't I don't have
Images are
many.
staged.
Yeah, I don't have like other jerseys and stuff from other players. I'd never asked for that stuff from other guys. So um, I wish I had like a, easy answer for you. Like, oh, I have my Messi and Ronaldo jerseys sitting in the back of my closet. I don't. I don't.
Yes.
Yeah.
You'll play against them this year. It's not already done. All the oldies. And is there anything that you think you could send that you would have? Probably not anything from your career that could land on this wall here.
Yeah, I can send a jersey, no problem. I can absolutely send a jersey. Whatever you'd like, no problem, man. Yeah, I'm happy to send whatever.
Wonderful.
Absolutely. Yeah.
There's a bit of space left, so that will be wonderful. Thank you so
There you
much
go.
for your time, Brendan. Like I said,
You're
45 minute
welcome, man.
tops. You probably have lots of
Appreciate
other
you.
stuff to do. It was great seeing you. We wish you the best for the upcoming season, which started well, and we hope
Thank you.
it's only going to get better. And hopefully
Appreciate
one
you.
day you'll come and play here in Montreal.
Yeah, not on the schedule this year, but let's see. You never know. You never know. We'll see maybe for next year or whatever.
Cool.
Yeah, I got a couple buddies up in
Yes.
Montreal I got to see too. So yeah, all the best.
Nice. Thank you so much for your time, Brendan. Again, have a great day.
You too. Take care, Leo. Bye.
Bye.